this is my current morning drink that is partially recommended by Inside Tracker, and I'm excluding basically supplements from this morning drink. So I do have the supplements I take in a separate glass in capsule form. This is 3.5 scoops for a day, so I'd have 10 tablespoons in this glass. This glass is from Sauerkraut. In order to maybe have a size reference, I think this is 700 milliliters or something like this. So I have 10 tablespoons of bulk greens in there. The recommendation on the bulk package is 3.5 scoops, and the 3.5 scoops are kind of equivalent to about 1 tablespoon for a day. What this then also includes is, so it is not let's just start a new sentence. This seems to be the most useful implementation of the Inside Tracker habit called vegetable variety, I think it is called, or something else, which is basically recommending to eat a certain amount of portions of vegetables in a given day. Now, because I wanted to have this kind of ensured, I've searched for a solution for this to also be as a powder, such that I could already have it as a shake in the morning, such that I would not have to worry about this later on. So I already ordered it at this company, so I got the greens powder from them. Of course, this is not a vegetable powder, but just the greens powder, but this is the best solution I could find. The second thing in here is also a recommendation by Inside Tracker, which is cocoa powder. The recommendation is the recommendation's name is to enjoy a bit of dark chocolate or something like this, but an alternative, which is also mentioned in there, is 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder. So I get the cocoa powder at the grocery store, even though Brian Johnson, for example, at least in regards to his product, says it's very important that it fulfills all of these criteria. Well, potentially, but I also cannot invest so much time into this, so I just buy it at the grocery store. And also it's cheaper at the grocery store compared to Brian Johnson's cocoa powder. This cost me for, I think, 200 grams, €2.50, which is basically about €1 per 100 gram. The next thing then is flaxseed. Now the flaxseed recommendation Inside Tracker gave me was 4 tablespoons in a day. I tried this as kind of the morning shake, but the problem is that the morning shake so it seems to be the case that one should ingest protein in the morning and give the body protein in the morning. So the more I have ingredients in there which just have their own macronutrients, such as cocoa powder, which also has a little bit of fat in there and also a little bit of carbs in addition to the protein, the more ingredients I have in there that kind of dilute the potency of this being a protein drink, actually. So this is not a protein drink, but what I do is I mix it with 3 scoops of whey protein, usually each morning. So it then becomes kind of a protein shake, which in addition has a few other things in there. And the more I have other things that dilute it in there, that dilute basically the protein content, it's not the absolute, but relatively speaking, the less protein I have, relatively speaking. Therefore, I now reduced the recommendation of flaxseed down to 1 scoop of the bulk scoops, and this is maybe about half a tablespoon. I think that's the recommendation from the bulk packaging. So again, the same company, and I just took the recommendation that is on there, because then I don't have to make up a recipe, but I can just remember the ingredients and then just take the standard recommendation and put it in here for the next 10 days. So I just put 10 into this. The next recommendation is not flaxseed, but psyllium powder, and this is actually not a nutritional recommendation. I then just happened to find in a powdered form because of my idea to make milkshakes. But the next ingredient then is a supplement recommendation, which is the only one I have in this powder. Why do I have it in there? Because I wanted to make sure that even if I drink, or I happen to drink just this shake here and a couple of protein shakes with a little bit of other ingredients in a given day, that I still would have a little bit more fiber compared to the situation in which I would just ingest the fiber that is in there. Now often, or usually, I have maybe half of my caloric intake in shakes and half of it not. Maybe sometimes it's like 20% in shakes and the rest in normal food. Nonetheless, I wanted to have a lever in there, and also it was a recommendation by Inside Tracker. And the idea was to take this approach Brian Johnson already somewhat popularized, or rather the idea of, okay, what would happen if you just, with an algorithm, took better care of your health than you do. Now I tried to find an early prototype for this, and I already did a blood test with Inside Tracker, and so they already had food recommendations. And the idea was, what if I just implement these food recommendations and therefore try to improve my blood work based on the data they analyzed, and therefore then resulted with these interpretations, not interpretations, but recommendations. And therefore I tried to basically get all the food recommendations that made sense and also were financially viable into a powdered form, and then put them into this morning drink, at least this half of the morning drink, because it seems to not make sense to mix it with protein powder, because then if I change an ingredient or a ratio, then I can change the whole thing, because, well, it is then 2.5 kilogram of something. And so I just put it in this here, and I additionally add the protein. Then I also recently began to add salt. Now, in terms of what I forgot to mention, the psyllium husk powder is now half a scoop of bulk, which maybe is a third of a teaspoon. So it's not that much. It's for 1 day, so I put in 5 scoops in total for the 10 days. So this is what fits into this glass, about 10 days worth. Now, then I also recently began to add salt, because I usually salt what I drink, and if I mix a protein shake, or rather my morning drink, which consists out of this here, plus the protein, because I usually add salt, I then would have to add salt after the fact. And because I also add lemon juice and apple cider vinegar to this morning drink, it already became quite a couple of steps. And so I decided to at least try to put a little bit of salt in it. Of course, the risk is that if you pour too much salt in it, then you have too much salt in it, and you cannot really dilute the salt or get rid of the salt as soon as it is in there. So I try to err on the side of caution in this case. Now, these are then all. Now, one ingredient is missing. It's garlic. The recommendation from Inside Tracker is 1 gram per day, which is supposed to help with a few things. In my blood work, mostly, because that's the data Inside Tracker interprets. It also has access to Garmin, and it pulls my resting heart rate as well as VO2 max, as well as my sleep in there. But that, in my experience, did not change the recommendations, because I think after effect, after a couple of weeks, and also after I uploaded the blood results, I was able to connect it with Garmin, because I had an issue there. And so I think it didn't change much of the recommendations. It also seems to me that maybe many of the recommendations are kind of averaging out recommendations, one could say, that work for many people. It seems many people might profit from this and might profit from this, so it seems to be the case that even though they are individualized, they still then would outrank more individual recommendations, because they just have higher potency. Inside Tracker marks this as an impact score, which goes, I think, from 0 to 10. Now, therefore, there are also 10 grams of garlic in there. I just get the normal garlic spice at the supermarket and then put it in here. Now, this is then in total my morning drink, which I, as I already mentioned, mixed together with 3 scoops of whey protein. In the past, I did this with 2, then I increased it to 2.5. And before I took whey protein, I did take vegetable protein, not vegetable protein, but rather plant protein. I also relied on the vegan protein, which is the protein I took from bulk, which is a mix out of multiple proteins, so a blend. Pumpkin seed protein is in there, flaxseed protein, I think, and so it already kind of also provided a kind of a, while still providing vegetables, it also provided the function of, or rather the value of protein in the morning for me. But I eventually then switched to the whey protein. I can't remember, or rather now retrospectively, track this decision down to its main variables, so I just eventually changed, and as of now don't know really why.